When you think of Canada, what comes to mind? Maybe it's peace, politeness, and those vast, quiet landscapes. It's a nation known for its welcoming spirit, universal healthcare, and a whole lot of wilderness. But the story of how Canada came to be is anything but quiet. It's an epic of survival stretching back millennia. It's a story of conquest, rebellion, and the forging of a unique identity from the clash of empires and cultures. This isn't just a history of dates and treaties, it's the story of peoples, those who were here since time immemorial, and those who crossed oceans searching for a new life. To really get the complex, multicultural Canada we know today, we have to go way back to the beginning. The story of Canada doesn't start with a European flag planted on some distant shore. It begins much, much earlier. Academics generally believe the first peoples reached North America at some point between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago, with some evidence suggesting it could have been even earlier. During the last ice age, massive glacier locked up so much of the world's water that a land bridge, known as Beringia, connected Asia and North America. Across this bridge walked the first peoples, hunters following herds of mammoth and bison into a new world. As the ice retreated, they moved south and east, adapting brilliantly to the diverse and demanding lands of this continent. And we're not talking about one single group, but a stunningly rich tapestry of distinct societies that evolved over thousands of years. On the Pacific coast, nations like the Haida and Nunavut built sophisticated societies on the bounty of the sea, creating monumental totem poles and intricate art. Out on the Great Plains, the Cree and the Siksika, also known as the Blackfoot Confederacy, were masters of the bison hunt, their lives and spirituality woven into the great herds. In the eastern woodlands, the Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois Confederacy, formed a powerful political and military alliance of 6 nations, living in longhouses and mastering the cultivation of corn, beans, and squash. And up in the harsh, beautiful Arctic, the Inuit and their ancestors developed remarkable technologies to thrive, hunting seal and whale in one of the planet's most extreme climates. So, by the time Europeans started showing up, this land was home to hundreds of distinct nations, speaking more than 60 different languages. They had complex systems of government, trade networks that crisscrossed the continent, and deep spiritual beliefs rooted in the land itself. This was not an empty wilderness waiting to be discovered, it was a continent of vibrant, ancient cultures. It was a world about to be changed forever. The first Europeans to land on what we now call Canada were probably Norse sailors from Greenland. Around 1000 AD, Leif Erikson led an expedition that set up a small camp at Lance Auxiliary Meadows in Newfoundland. But it didn't last, and for another 500 years, the continent belonged solely to its indigenous inhabitants. That all changed in 1497. The Italian explorer John Cabot, sailing for England, landed on the Atlantic coast, claimed it for the English crown, and made a note of the absolutely astonishing amount of codfish. This discovery kicked off a new interest in the area, mainly for those rich fishing grounds. But it was France that would make the first real push to build a colony. In 1534, the French explorer Jacques Cartier sailed into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. In a now famous mix-up, he heard the Iroquoian word for village, Karnata, and thought it was the name for the whole territory. Soon after, the name Canada appeared on a world map for the first time. Cartier's attempts to start a settlement fizzled out, but the French dream of a North American empire didn't. That dream would fall to Samuel de Champlain, the father of New France. He was a brilliant explorer and mapmaker who, in 1608, founded a permanent settlement at Quebec City, perfectly placed on a cliff overlooking the St. Lawrence River. New France wasn't just built on conquest, it was built on commerce, and one thing in particular, fur. Beaver pelts were the hot fashion item in Europe for felt hats, so the French formed deep commercial and military alliances with indigenous nations, especially the Huron-Wendat, Algonquin, and Inuit. These alliances were everything. Indigenous partners supplied the furs, the knowledge of the land, and the military muscle that allowed the tiny French population to survive and grow. It was a relationship of mutual dependency, though it was often unequal and full of tension. European goods like kettles, knives, and guns were traded for furs. But this contact also brought devastation in the form of European diseases, to which indigenous peoples had no immunity, leading to catastrophic losses of life. For over 100 years, New France grew slowly, stretching from the St. Lawrence Valley, through the Great Lakes, and down the Mississippi River. Montreal was founded in 1642, and a unique French-Canadian society, the Canadians, started to take shape. But France wasn't alone. To the south, the British colonies were booming in population. And to the north, the powerful Hudson's Bay Company, chartered by England in 1670, controlled a huge territory called Rupert's Land and was a fierce competitor in the fur trade. The stage was set for a continental showdown. The final act came with the 7 Years' War, a global throwdown between Britain and France that, in North America, was called the French and Indian War. The decisive battle for Canada went down on September 13, 1759. On a field outside Quebec City, now known as the Plains of Abraham, British forces under General James Wolfe defeated the French under the Marquis de Montcalm. Both generals died in the fight, but the British victory was total. Montreal fell a year later. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris officially ended the war, and France gave up nearly all of its North American territory, including Canada, to Great Britain. The dream of New France was over. But the 70,000 French-speaking, Catholic Canadians who were now under British rule would make sure the French fact in North America wasn't going anywhere. With the fall of New France, Britain was now in charge of a vast, diverse, and tricky new territory. Realizing they needed to manage their new French-speaking subjects, the British Parliament passed the Quebec Act of 1774. This was a game-changer. It guaranteed Catholics the right to hold office and preserved French civil law, protecting the language, religion, and social structure of the Canadians. It was meant to ensure loyalty, but the increasingly angry 13 colonies to the south saw it as one of the intolerable acts. Right on cue, the American Revolution exploded. The American rebels invaded Canada, hoping to get the French Canadians on their side, but the invasion failed. After the American victory, a wave of about 50,000 United Empire Loyalists, people who had stayed loyal to Britain, fled the new United States. They settled in Nova Scotia and, crucially, in the wilderness of what would become Ontario, completely changing the demographic and political map of the British colonies. To deal with these two very different groups, English-speaking Protestant Loyalists and French-speaking Catholic Canadians, Britain passed the Constitutional Act of 1791. It split the province of Quebec into two new colonies, Upper Canada, which was mostly English-speaking and used British law, and Lower Canada, which was mostly French-speaking and kept its unique legal and religious traditions. This move basically laid the foundation for modern Ontario and Quebec. The early 19th century brought another huge conflict, the War of 1812. The United States, furious about British trade restrictions and the forced recruitment of American sailors, declared war and invaded Canada again. The war was a brutal, 2-year fight. It saw American forces burn York, the capital of Upper Canada, now Toronto, and in retaliation, British forces burned Washington, D.C. Critically, First Nations warriors, led by heroes like the Great Shawnee Chief Tecumseh, allied with the British and Canadian militias. They played a vital role in throwing back the American invasions. The war ended in a draw, but for Canadians, it was a psychological win. A sense of a distinct identity, one separate from the United States, was forged in the fire of that war. But peace at home didn't last. Through the 1820s and 30s, frustration grew in both Upper and Lower Canada over the power held by small, unelected groups of elites. In 1837, that anger boiled over into armed rebellion. In Lower Canada, Louis-Joseph Papineau led the Patriots. And in Upper Canada, William Lyon Mackenzie led his own revolt. Both uprisings were crushed quickly, but they sent a shockwave to London. So, Britain sent Lord Durham to figure out what went wrong. His famous 1838 Durham Report had two huge recommendations. First, unite the two Canadas into one colony to assimilate the French Canadians, and second, grant the colonies responsible government, a system where the cabinet answers to the elected assembly, not to a colonial governor. In 1841, the Act of Union merged the colonies into the province of Canada. And although it took a few more years of political fighting, responsible government was finally achieved in 1848. It was a huge step on the long road to running their own affairs. By the middle of the 19th century, British North America was a patchwork of separate colonies, the province of Canada, itself a tense marriage of Canada East and Canada West, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. But several powerful forces were pushing them toward a much bigger idea. Politically, the province of Canada was stuck. Canada East, Quebec, and Canada West, Ontario, had equal representation in the legislature, which meant constant political gridlock. Leaders like John A. Macdonald from the West and George Etienne Cartier from the East realized that only a brand new federal system could break the stalemate. Economically, the colonies needed to create a bigger market for themselves. Britain was ending its special trade deals, and the United States was threatening to cancel a key trade agreement. A unified country could build the necessary infrastructure, especially a cross-country railway, to boost internal trade and link the scattered regions together. Militarily, there was a growing fear of the United States. The American Civil War had just shown the power of a large, modern army, and many in British North America worried that the victorious North might turn its gaze northward. A united country would be stronger and better able to defend itself. The first real step toward this new nation was taken in September 1864 in Charlottetown, PEI. A conference that was supposed to just be about a union of the maritime colonies was joined by a delegation from the province of Canada. They showed up and pitched a much grander vision, a federation of all the colonies. The idea caught fire. A month later, at the Quebec Conference, the delegates hammered out the details, creating a blueprint for a federal system with a clever division of powers between the central government and the provinces. After one last conference in London, the British Parliament passed the British North America Act. On July 1, 1867, the Dominion of Canada was born, uniting Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. John A. Macdonald became the country's first Prime Minister. This wasn't full independence. Britain still handled foreign policy, but it was a revolutionary step. Confederation was a bold political experiment, an attempt to build a new nation on a foundation of compromise, stretching across a vast and challenging land. The new Dominion of Canada was just for provinces in the eastern half of the continent. But John A. Macdonald's vision was much bigger, a Murray usque ad mare, from sea to sea. His government moved fast to expand westward. In 1869, Canada bought the gigantic territory of Rupert's Land from the Hudson's Bay Company, a massive area stretching from Labrador to the Rocky Mountains. There was just one problem: this massive deal was done without consulting anyone who actually lived there, particularly the Métis of the Red River Settlement, a distinct people of mixed Indigenous and European heritage with their own unique culture. Fearing for their land, language, and rights, the Métis, led by the charismatic 25-year-old Louis Riel, formed a provisional government and resisted the Canadian takeover. This act of defiance led to negotiations that created Canada's fifth province, Manitoba, in 1870, with guarantees for Métis land and language rights. To connect these far-flung territories, Macdonald's government made a huge promise to build a transcontinental railway. This promise was the bait that lured British Columbia into Confederation in 1871, followed by Prince Edward Island in 1873. The construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway was a monumental feat of engineering and a defining national project, but it came at a brutal cost, both financially and in the horrific exploitation of thousands of Chinese laborers. The last spike was hammered into the track in 1885, physically tying the country together from the Atlantic to the Pacific. As settlers flooded into the West, the lives of Indigenous peoples were changed forever. The government pushed a policy of treaties and assimilation, forcing nations onto reserves and trying to extinguish their traditional ways of life. The Indian Act of 1876 gave the federal government sweeping and oppressive powers over the lives of First Nations people. It banned cultural practices and created the devastating residential school system, designed to forcibly assimilate Indigenous children. This policy would leave a legacy of trauma that Canada is still reckoning with today. Renewed pressure on Indigenous peoples and the government's failure to address the grievances of the Métis led to a second resistance in 1885, the Northwest Rebellion, once again led by Louis Riel. This time, Ottawa responded with military force. The rebellion was crushed. Riel was captured, tried for treason, and executed. His execution split the country down French-English lines and cemented his status as either a martyr or a traitor, a debate that still echoes today. By the turn of the century, the map of Canada was looking more familiar. The Yukon Territory was created in 1898 during the Klondike Gold Rush, and in 1905, the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan were carved out of the prairies. The nation was built, but its creation had come at a great cost, leaving deep scars and unresolved questions about its identity and its relationship with the people who were here first. As the 20th century began, Canada was a nation finding its feet, still technically a dominion of the British Empire, but with a growing sense of self. That identity would be forged in the fires of 2 world wars. When World War I broke out in 1914, Canada was automatically at war as part of the British Empire. Over 600,000 Canadians enlisted, a staggering number for a country of just 8 million. On the battlefields of Europe, Canadian soldiers earned a reputation as elite shock troops. Their defining moment came in April 1917, at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. For the first time, all 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps fought together. They captured a heavily fortified German position that British and French forces had failed to take. The victory was a stunning military achievement and a moment of national awakening. A Canadian general, Arthur Currie, commanded the corps, and the victory was seen as purely Canadian. As one veteran famously said, "We went up Vimy Ridge as Albertans and Ontarians. We came down as Canadians." The war had a huge impact back home. It sparked industrial growth and accelerated the women's suffrage movement, with most Canadian women getting the right to vote by 1918. But it also created deep, bitter divisions, especially during the 1917 conscription crisis, which tore French and English Canada apart. The immense sacrifice of the war, with over 60,000 dead, earned Canada its own seat at the Paris Peace Conference and in the new League of Nations. It was a crucial step onto the world stage. Through the 1920s and 30s, Canada slowly pried itself away from British control, culminating in the 1931 Statute of Westminster, which formally recognized Canada as a self-governing and equal nation within the British Commonwealth. So when World War II began in 1939, Canada made its own declaration of war, as an independent nation. Over 1 million Canadians served. The country played a critical role in everything from the Battle of the Atlantic to the D-Day landings on Juno Beach, where Canadian forces pushed farther inland than any other Allied troops on the first day. The war effort transformed Canada into a major industrial nation and left it as a significant middle power when the guns fell silent in 1945. The post-war years brought Canada an incredible wave of prosperity and change. The country's borders were finally settled when Newfoundland joined Confederation as the 10th province in 1949. A new confidence swept the nation, perfectly captured by the adoption of its own distinctive national flag, the maple leaf, in 1965. This era also saw the birth of many social programs that define Canada today, including universal healthcare. And in 1967, Expo 67 in Montreal showed off a modern, vibrant, and optimistic Canada to the entire world. But this period also saw old tensions flare up again. In Quebec, the Quiet Revolution of the 1960s was a dramatic shift away from the traditional power of the Catholic Church toward a more secular, nationalist, and assertive provincial government. This sparked the rise of a powerful separatist movement. Tensions boiled over during the 1970 October crisis, when a radical group, the FLQ, kidnapped a British diplomat and a Quebec cabinet minister. Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act, sending troops into Montreal. The question of separatism would dominate Canadian politics for decades, leading to sovereignty referendums in 1980 and again in 1995, which was defeated by the slimmest of margins. Under Trudeau, Canada also set out on a new constitutional path. In 1982, The Constitution was patriated, which meant Canada finally had the full power to amend its own constitution without asking Britain. Embedded in this new constitution was the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a document that protects the fundamental rights of all Canadians and has had a massive impact on Canadian law and society. This era also saw multiculturalism become official policy, celebrating the country's diverse ethnic makeup, fed by new waves of immigration from every corner of the globe. At the same time, a profound change was happening in the relationship with Indigenous peoples. In 1960, First Nations people finally gained the right to vote in federal elections without losing their treaty status. The decades since have been a long, hard fight for the recognition of Indigenous rights, self-government, and justice for past wrongs. The closure of the last federally run residential school, Gordon's Indian Residential School in Saskatchewan, in 1996. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that followed have forced a national reckoning with a dark and painful chapter of Canadian history. Today, reconciliation remains one of the most urgent and complex challenges the nation faces. A major step toward Indigenous self-determination was the creation of Nunavut in 1999, a vast territory governed by the Inuit. From the first footsteps across the Bering Land Bridge to the complex, multicultural nation we see today, the story of Canada is one of constant reinvention. It's a story of vast landscapes and the diverse peoples they shaped. It's a narrative defined by the enduring presence of Indigenous nations, the foundational clash of French and British empires, and the never-ending project of building one country out of many different peoples. Canada's history isn't a simple, clean story of progress. It's full of conflict, compromise, and contradiction. It's the story of building a peaceful kingdom, but also of colonial violence. It's a story of forging unity while constantly wrestling with deep regional and cultural divides. The journey from Karnataka to Canada is a story that's still being written, as the nation continues to face its past and chart its future. What part of Canadian history do you find the most fascinating? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this journey through time valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into our shared history.